boils down to belonging as opposed to fitting in throughout their lifetime have been excluded or felt different. And so they have learned to mask.
Fitting in is squeezing yourself into this square box. Belonging is when. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversation. So today we have Jen Kreiner with us again from out in Montana, and we have, well, we're going to start with a great conversation topic when it comes to masking and being our authentic selves, which are pretty big topics when it comes to ADHD. So, welcome back, Jen. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Janine. I love this topic. I recently, um, so I'm a certified ADHD life coach and executive function coach supporting professionals in the workplace, and recently spoke at a statewide conference for the Montana Society of Human Resource Management around the topic of neuro inclusion in the workplace. So understanding neurodivergent thinking and how cognitive diversity is very important to have stronger outcomes in the workplace. And it really boils down to people being accepted equals them belonging as opposed to fitting in. They're allowed to be their authentic selves. They can reclaim energy. And so that idea of masking, which in order to fit in so many neurodivergent individuals, it's a learned coping mechanism to hide their neurodivergent traits and struggles. So when we're able to understand more and lean in with curiosity as leadership or management, then we can really create a space where that individual can just be themselves. So I thought that would be a great topic for our conversation.
And I agree. And I wanted to go back and you said something really striking, and that is the difference between belonging and fitting in.
Yes. And so Brene Brown, a sociologist, PhD, has a great quote around that. And I don't have it off the top of my head, but ultimately, fitting in is changing yourself in order um, to conform to an environment. And so many institutions and systems and structures from our public school system, academia, the traditional workplace, family, and social constructs are all these neurotypical, which is your social and societal norms. They're based on those versus, allowing, one in five of us is neurodivergent. So those individuals throughout their lifetime have been excluded or felt different. They don't fit inside that neurotypical system or box. And so they have learned to mask. And so much energy goes in to conforming to something that you're not. And that, ultimately is that idea of masking. And then the idea of belonging is being somewhere where you're accepted as your true and authentic self.
So when you said that, I got this visual in my head of fitting in is squeezing yourself into this square box that doesn't fit you very well, right? It's making yourself fit into this box that other people seem to fit into pretty easily. Belonging is when the box takes your shape and
Mm,
allows you to fill the space with your shape.
yes, I love that you brought up this visual, and I have an analogy in my presentation and that I've shared on LinkedIn is, these neurotypical expectations view individuals as a brick. Everybody's a uniform, should fit together just like that. But when we look at everybody, we reframe, and that lens looks at everybody as a very unique and individual puzzle piece. And it takes some time to see how they align and where they fit together. But that's where we create opportunities to align that contribution is going to be different. Those skill sets, experiences from each person um, do align. It's just figuring out how that works. And just like you said, that unique visual of somebody versus the uniform box.
So when we talk about masking, Jen, like those of us who are really familiar with the terminology that surrounds ADHD, we hear masking and we know exactly what that is. But when we talk to somebody who maybe just got diagnosed with ADHD and doesn't know a whole lot about ADHD, how would you describe masking in order for them to understand what masking is?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the definition ultimately is a coping mechanism to hide your neurodivergent traits, characteristics, or struggles in order to be seen as normal or fit in. For somebody who's, trying to wrap their head around that, what does that look like as an adult? Like, do you come out of situations, social, professional, personal, and you're exhausted? Like, you need to recharge, you need downtime, separation from interactions. And likely it's because you have spent so much of your energy becoming what you think others need to see.
Hmm. Hmm. And we're talking about mental energy here. And just because you can't see the energy level dropping doesn't mean it isn't. And it does take
Yeah.
energy to keep that mask on. So for me, like an example of masking might be when I would sit in staff meetings, and I would try to keep myself still and keep myself like looking like I'm paying attention and not looking like I'm completely distracted because I am, and I'm crawling out of my skin because I can't move around. But when you look at me, I look calm,
Hmm.
cool, collected, and on the inside, I'm dying. And so that takes a lot of mental energy. And so when you say if you come away from a situation exhausted, that's one sign. Another sign is if you have to go to the bathroom during a situation just to take a breath and decompress,
Mm,
another
yep.
sign. Because
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who are like, yeah, I always went to the bathroom. I always went to the bathroom, because like where else can you go and just be and calm down?
Right.
You watch in a meeting, and there'll be one or two people who will be like to the bathroom twice, three times when like most people are 0 to 1. And those are the people who've been sitting there trying to keep their stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was always a kind of a fidgeter, holding a pen, spinning a pen around at conferences. Switching my legs back and forth, different positions, and then eventually just having to stand up in the back of the room. Um, and ultimately, like that stimming, that the repetitive stimulating actions is an individual trying to maintain presence so that they can process the information that's being shared.
Mhm.
So it's interesting. It's like a kid in a classroom, like the busier they are, you give them something to kind of put that stimulation to work, they are better able to process information. And I was in a board meeting as an adult, sitting on a nonprofit board, and the individual who was speaking after the meeting said, "Oh, I felt like it was very rude that that other board member was doodling while I was speaking and not making eye contact." Well, I think that's one of the highest ranking neurotypical expectations is that eye contact means something. But that individual who was doodling, likely she could process what was being said because she was able to, stimulate in a different way. But that's one of the things is understanding if we can reframe an individual's level of eye contact doesn't mean they're being respectful or professional. If they're looking down or away while they're speaking or being spoken to, that's them doing their best to
Mhm.
absorb the information, or speak with clarity about what they have to say. Because if I can make eye contact with you, but I'm just staring at the middle of your forehead and I'm thinking about staring at the middle of your forehead, it's not like I hear what you're actually saying.
Exactly. Because, like, if I have to make eye contact with you, I'm going to be concentrating on making eye contact, not on what you're saying.
Right.
And
Right.
so for me, the doodle thing just totally brought that, because I tend to listen better if I'm drawing or if I'm doodling.
Mhm.
And I use a lot of
Yeah.
putty for, like fidgeting. Fidgets are pretty important when it comes to keeping your mask in place. But I want to talk about keeping your mask in place. There is a point, there is a point to which everybody, in order to fit in, needs to conduct themselves in a certain way. I mean, like as an ADHD person, I cannot go into a meeting and expect that people are going to accept and that I'm going to belong if I'm sitting there doing jumping jacks through the whole meeting or something like that, right? Or
Mhm.
doing something extreme. So there is a level of fitting in. But then there are other things that I can do to remove that mask as well. Like I can tell, my supervisor or somebody I'm struggling with sitting still. I can get up and walk around if it's, not too disruptive. I can play with putty and can do all of those things. Is that then still masking, or is that coping at that point? Because we do sometimes have to fit the norms of society.
Yes. And so as it pertains to the workplace, we'll specifically go there, is that if your diagnosis is disclosed to your employer, this is a personal decision. There's a lot of points to consider to feel safe about opening up, and sharing about your neurodivergent condition, which, as we know, it is the norm, not the exception, to have co-occurring conditions. So ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, learning disabilities, OCD, anxiety disorders.
Depression.
And so when you understand more about yourself, where those patterns are, where your energy is being drained, or there are challenges around communication, then it's an opportunity to say, what do I need? What accommodations? So instead of like a coping mechanism, how can I be accommodated in this situation? So let's talk about meetings. Is there a best way that I can contribute to this meeting? Maybe it doesn't mean I have to be face to face and in the room. Maybe there can be a Zoom element where I can stay at my desk and still be able to contribute, whether it is via the chat and then somebody speaking on my behalf, or if I have advanced information and I'm given an opportunity to process and think about how I want to participate in the meeting. And then if it's a hyperactive body situation, yeah, having fidgets, having structured breaks involved in your day. And so this is where there's like this co-creation of a solution for the accommodations that you need in order to perform your essential function in the role of your job.
All right.
Does
So,
that does that tend to meet what you're thinking about coping, coping versus like I can accommodate myself. Like let's say I work in an open office environment and every time I hear keyboards tapping away, my focus goes to the keyboard. So in terms of sensory processing, individuals that have challenges with sensory processing, it lights up the pain centers in our brain. So the level of distress that occurs with light, temperature, it's going to be different for different people. But so I can sit there and not do my job and be distracted all day because I hear keyboards, or I can talk with my supervisor about that. They can provide, potentially there's like a meeting room that I can sit in and do work in there. I can get noise canceling headphones. Those are all examples of accommodations so that I don't have to sit and again expend energy in this state of distress and expect that I'm going to be at my highest level of output or performance.
Absolutely. And so when I think about masking, I think about being at that level where we're just gonna grin and bear it and
Mhm.
make ourselves fit, right? And we're not gonna ask for the accommodations. We're not going to accommodate ourselves. We're just gonna make ourselves do what everybody else does,
Yeah.
the best of our ability. And so I want to talk about how that can be really detrimental to a person besides just taking up your energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of in what we talked about at the very beginning with the authenticity of ourselves. If we can't be our authentic selves, then we are
Mhm.
constantly pretending to be somebody else, right? And I would love it if you would share about your speech that you did the other day and about how the mask kind of is going away in there.
Yeah, yeah. And I see it in so many of my like one-on-one clients. It's this level that they have to get to on their own. Nobody can be told, flip the switch, be yourself. It's a level of learning to accept yourself. When I can accept that this is how I am, this is how my brain works, um, then I can advocate for myself. I understand more about myself and I can step into that. Often there's so many environments that just aren't healthy to enable you to step into that. And it's also, there's so much fear around that because it's likely a lifetime of judgment and discrimination that these individuals have already experienced, that they're frankly traumatized. So they will sit and stay under that mask in order to be accepted. And so the foundation of all the work that we do as coaches is really helping people to get to that place where this is normal. This is normal for us. And so if I can accept that this is how I am and I can be okay, then you start to be okay that you're never going to control or influence other people's perception of you. And so it's starting to realize, what environments do I want to put myself in? What people do I want to be around? And we have more control than we think we do. Um, because we have had this lifetime of being convinced that I'm going to be okay if everybody around me is okay. If I can
Mhm.
make everybody see me as fitting in, then they're going to be okay. They're going to be comfortable. And I'm just going to have to be, sit in this discomfort. But that's okay. And really, when you come to this place of learning more about your brain and accepting it, you're I like who I am. I can live out loud. And maybe this is just people will show you, people, you will have the evidence of the supervisor that is not willing to co-create solutions with you or be open and accepting of you. And so you get to make decisions at that point,
Mhm.
right? Like this is an opportunity to design your life with intention, and so often we allow things to just keep happening to us. If you're somebody that's just, I keep having to be reactive and deal with the things that are happening to me, what would it be like to step into that space that advocates for yourself and knows that that's okay?
Mhm.
It's okay if
Yeah.
somebody else is uncomfortable with who I am.
And that's a really tough one for a lot of us because we all
For
really want to
sure.
be loved and not
Oh,
rejected.
yeah. Yep.
Because the RSD thing comes in, and then we're afraid of being rejected if we're ourselves. But I want to take it even deeper as far as like when I myself started to kind of unmask a little bit. I went through a period of time where I was like, okay, so who am I really? Right? Because I have been pretending to be other people or be, to fit into this box for years. And so when I pour myself into this container that is my shape and size, I don't know what shape and size to make that because I don't know myself that well. And so unmasking isn't just like being able to say, poof, I'm going to be myself now. You have to figure out who the heck you are in the first place before you can do that. And then another thing that I ran into with that is if I'm unmasking and I'm letting my true self be out there for everybody to see, and I know who I am at this point and I want people to see it and all that stuff, then do the people who I made friends with when I was masking, is that still the same person, right? And so, like, do they like me or do they like the person I pretended to be? And so then I had some psychological things that went on about that. Do they really like me or do they like the person that I felt like I needed to be?
That is such a cool like thread of awareness around stepping into that space, who you have surrounded yourself with, and ultimately it's a conversation around your self-concept, right? Just like you said, am I and this level of self-trust, right? Am I comparing myself to others, and then what's important to them, I am making important to me, because if it's important to them, then it must be important, to kind of conform to that. Um, and I mean, an example that comes up is like being a mom and like what the good moms are doing, and they're making things from scratch and sewing the Halloween costume and doing all the things. It's like, okay, do I have the capacity for that? Like, I think I did that one year and I was like, oh, yikes. Um, so it's recognizing that if you're getting your sense of who you are from an external locus of control, like a point that's outside of yourself, and all the work that we do, which this is the work of our lives, is coming back into ourselves, turning inward and trusting that who am I? What do I really like? Where do I get that sense of excitement and joy and peace? And that's what we're starting to like drip back into our lives. And it's okay to understand that people you allowed to be in your life or at a certain tier, right? If we put people into levels of safety and trust, it's okay to kind of move people down, recognizing they're not very safe. They don't accept me.
Mhm.
They can't respond in a safe way when I say, I don't like that, or I wish, you know, this could be different. Or if you set a boundary with somebody, that they respond in a way that is not supportive. So you just start to gather more evidence, and sometimes we do end up surrounding ourselves with unsafe people.
Mhm. And so when you make that decision to drop your mask, to try to be more authentically yourself and true to yourself, there's also a level of preparation you need to have about the fact that other people may not respond the way that you're hoping that they're going to. And
Yeah.
that comes back to then do you conform to fit with them again, or do you stay true and authentic to yourself and let that relationship fall away or change, right? So I think a lot of times we talk about, dropping the mask or, no, I don't mask anymore and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot that goes into that. And I think that a lot of times people simplify the idea of dropping the mask and becoming our authentic selves. It's not it's not a simple thing that can be done overnight. It's scary. It can be confusing. It can change relationships. So what is the benefit that and I would say for sure that the benefit of dropping the mask and becoming your authentic self is worth all of that other stuff. But when we talk about the benefit of being our authentic selves, what is that? Like literally functioning as the person that you are, what does that give you?
That was beautiful. Everything that you just said. And yes, that really encompasses it. stepping into uncertainty can induce so much anxiety. And this process is going to be different. It's going to look different for every individual based on where they are, who they're surrounded by, their experiences, the levels of support that they have at the time. But when we step into our true self, there is a sense of fulfillment. And I would say, as you go through this process, you begin to turn inward first at every step. You check in with yourself, you validate that what feels wrong is wrong. What hit you as untrustworthy, to not second guess yourself. And again, that people pleasing, I will put on the show, do the thing, say the thing so that that person is comfortable and that they accept me. And it's going to this place where when I'm my authentic self and I'm stepping into decisions that make sense for me, I'm inviting people into my life. I'm starting to attract people who, oh, this is another Brene Brown. You are this like flame of a candle. Some people want to come around you and blow that flame out. Those are likely the people that you know, you're conforming to make them comfortable. Otherwise, they're telling you something's wrong with you. But you're this candle, you're this beautiful light. And when you're your authentic self and you belong, the people that come around your candle are there to be warmed by your light.
Absolutely beautiful.
That, yeah, and I believe that that is so worth it. It's where we find our purpose. It's how we find genuine connection with others. Um, it's how we learn to set a destination for ourselves.
I would
It
argue
is,
that to do that, what you just said with making connections with others, real authentic connections with others, you have to be your authentic self. You can't pretend, you can't be masked and have an authentic relationship with somebody. The two are exclusive.
yeah, yeah. I have a group of girlfriends and we're 20, 25 years deep. And we are able to challenge each other. We are able to bring up hard things that might be new information for the other person to see themselves or reframe themselves in that way. But it goes both ways. I feel safe to say something and I feel safe to receive something. That is ultimately, where you want to be in the center of.
So, what would you say to somebody who says, I'm afraid I'll lose my friends if I start acting like myself?
I would, again, as a coach, ask, what is that cost to you?
Hmm.
So what is the cost, when it becomes an expense to ourselves to be somebody that we're not,
Hmm.
is that worth it? I think we talk about this a lot, that cost analysis.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And and that decision is going to be theirs. There's some people in your life that, likely they are always going to be there, right? Your family, for example. It's the level you allow of energy, of honesty. Some people need to have stronger boundaries set, um, so that you can still be yourself and be safe, um, and keep them in your life. I think we have a classmate, and she said, boundaries allow me to keep people closer to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's,
Absolutely.
I think, Cheryl was the first time I heard was from her. And I love that. It's true. It's like if I advocate for myself and my needs, which is something a lot of neurodivergent individuals do not do, they have not been taught to advocate for their needs. But if I
Well,
can learn to set that boundary, then you can still be in my life. You can still be close to me.
absolutely. And I think we touched on it earlier too, as far as when you become your authentic self, in order to be your authentic self, you learn to accept who you are, right? And your acceptance comes from within and not from without. So as the mask is coming off, you are developing a stronger acceptance of oneself from oneself and not looking externally as much for that, what's the word I'm looking for? Confirmation that you're okay,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah.
you already have it within you. You're building that within you as you work that process.
And that was probably one of the first in my journey after I was diagnosed in my early 40s, recognizing how often I needed external validation for me to believe it. If
Mhm.
somebody else said that I was talented, smart, um, right about something, my opinion was agreed with, then I could believe it. But when we step into this place of authenticity, we are the first point of check-in. And
Absolutely.
here's the thing is that I can believe two truths can be held at the same time. I can believe this to be true for myself, and I can allow somebody else to feel differently about a topic, about me, and I'm still okay.
Hmm.
That's a
Absolutely.
pretty high expectation to think that you can control everybody thinking the same thing about you.
Exactly. Exactly. And it
Exhausting.
and it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks of you. It
Yeah.
matters what you think of you and whether you're comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah. And this idea of mental and emotional like output into masking leads to physical exhaustion. And that is what burnout is. It's a nervous system just shut down.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I realized how heavy I masked when I was in my job and how much it contributed to, you know, me needing to retire early. There were lots of things that went into that, but I know I always felt like I had everybody fooled because I never felt like I was on top of it. I just never felt like I was on top of it. Um, but I pretended like I did. And my mask was a confident, strong, I know what I'm doing person. And on the inside, I was, really burning out and struggling trying to maintain that persona.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, well, Jen,
Yeah. It's
we had a great conversation.
I know it's a deep one. This is a deep one.
And I feel like we could keep going with it. Unfortunately, you've got like no time left. Otherwise, I'd be like, let's make this a two-parter. Uh, but I do think that we could continue with this in another episode. So I hope we will do so. But in the meantime, thank you for being on again, and thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you, and I love your insights. And I think you're probably like one of the most intelligent women I know. And so it's very
Oh,
nice to have you on to share your information.
oh, that's so kind. And I just want to acknowledge you for offering this platform because so much of just what we're talking about, masking, we are in this place of isolation. We hide what is hard for us and we compare ourselves to other people. But even in this platform of a podcast, it is relatable. It
Mhm.
creates a sense of community. It gives people a thread of commonality amongst, we're all presenting with our symptoms on a spectrum, but this is that like thread that runs through us is that we can all kind of relate to these ideas. And that is a beautiful gift to offer on this podcast.
Well, I always hope that, people when they get done listening to a podcast will feel maybe just a little less alone than they did before they started. So,
Love it. That's a great tagline. I love it.
So thank you, Jen, again. And for our butterflies on the wall who are listening, if you guys like what you hear or see, make sure you subscribe, like, and all the good stuff. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Janine.